Good afternoon, class. Today we're going to talk about how bones grow through intramembranous and endochondral ossification. So a big femur like this reaches its adult shape mostly by growing into the growth plates, which are known as the epiphyseal plates, and also by growing into the tough connective tissue membrane that surrounds the bone, known as the periosteum. So we're first going to take a look at how the bone grows into the periosteum through the process of intramembranous ossification. Now, this process will generally make the bone thicker. Now, let's take the bone and saw it in half. Now, let's imagine what we see here is the diaphysis of the bone, or the main shaft, sawed in half. And the diaphysis is surrounded by a membrane called the periosteum. The periosteum is made out of dense fibrous irregular connective tissue, which is made of a bunch of fibers woven tightly together, dense fibrous irregular connective tissue. Now, into that dense fibrous irregular connective tissue, osteoblasts will start to grow. And then those osteoblasts will start to take minerals, calcium and phosphorus, out of the blood and start to lay those minerals down along the fibers of the connective tissue. And in that way, the bone will grow thicker onto the outside. Now, a new layer of periosteum will grow, which will then fill in with bone, and the process will repeat itself over and over again, and that will make the bone grow wider and wider. Now, you may be wondering, does the medullary cavity get bigger too? It absolutely does. The osteoclasts will eat away at the inside of the medullary cavity, and we will end up with a much thicker, wider bone, but also with a bigger medullary cavity. And this is how we go from a little child's bone to an adult's bone. Now we're going to look at how bones lengthen themselves out at the epiphyseal plate, which is otherwise known as the growth plate. The epiphyseal plate is essentially a slice of hyaline cartilage that's left in a still growing bone. So I've magnified that slice of hyaline cartilage. We've got bone above and bone below. And now we're going to take an even closer look at the 5 zones of bone growth into an epiphyseal plate. Basically, bone goes through 5 stages as it grows. The cartilage that's in between the pieces of growing bone is hyaline cartilage, and far up into the middle of that, we've just got regular old chondrocytes of the hyaline cartilage sitting there by themselves, not doing a whole lot, but actually creating a little bit more cartilage as they go. And this area is known as the zone of reserve cartilage. Now, as the bone gets ready to start to grow, the chondrocytes actually increase in number in an area known as the zone of proliferation. After they're done increasing in number, they start to increase in size. And this area is going to be called the zone of hypertrophy. And you notice those chondrocytes are a little bigger. And you also notice they start to arrange themselves into columns. Now, in the next zone down, after they've gone through some more growth, we enter what's called the zone of calcification, and osteoblasts actually migrate into the lacunae of the chondrocytes and begin to take minerals out of the blood and lay those minerals down to create new bone. Finally, in the zone of bone formation, those minerals become harder and harder and more solidified and create these spines or trabeculae of spongy bone. And so in zone 5, we now have newly formed bone. So we go from zone 1, the zone of reserve cartilage, down to zone 5. And zone 5 would be your newest formed bone, and the bone is going to be growing upwards from zone 5 towards zone 1. So we've got the reserve cartilage, zone of proliferation, the zone of hypertrophy, then we've got the zone of calcification, and finally the zone of bone formation. Now, you may be wondering, that's a pretty small epiphyseal plate. Doesn't this bone just completely fill it in and stop the bone from growing? And it eventually will, but during a child's growth period, the cartilage continues to grow and force those ends of bone apart, so they never quite catch up until you're done growing, at which point your plates will stop growing and the bone will fuse all the way together. So now let's review We've got intramembranous ossification, which is where bone grows into connective tissue membrane, into the periosteum, and this tends to make bones thicker. We've got endochondral ossification, where bone grows into hyaline cartilage at the epiphyseal plate, and that tends to make bones grow longer. I hope that helped. So here's your key vocabulary: endochondral ossification and intramembranous ossification. And as always, if you like what you've seen, hit the like button and please subscribe to Mr. Bernard's YouTube channel. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.